Hi, Cameron Bishop here with this edition of the Squeezethenectar Big Questions blog. Today we're going to be answering a question that kind of plagues everybody, Christians and non-Christians alike. The question is, why are some Christians so disappointing? Well, my father used to always say that the church is a hospital, a school, and a worship center. The first part of that statement refers to the fact that Christ came as the great physician. That means he came for the broken and the hurting, not people who have it all together. The letter to the Romans says that all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. We're all going to disappoint. 1 John says anyone who claims that he is good is a liar. There's no truth in him. The fact is that all Christians will disappoint us at some time. And it's not because they're Christians. It's because we're people. People are prideful. We're insecure and overcompensating. We're easily stressed, judgmental, competitive, and often easily manipulated. The Renaissance cynic Niccolo Machiavelli famously said that men are ungrateful, fickle liars and deceivers, that they shun danger, they're greedy for profit, and when you treat them well, they'll be yours. Well, that's often true in all walks of life, not just for Christianity. You will hear people breathe the same exact criticisms about every institution in society. From marriage to the justice system, people seem to mess up everything. There are thousands of ways that a person can do wrong and disappoint. And they range from lust to greed and even violence. It's safe to say, though, that most of the time the offenses that are raised are not that visible. Most of the frustration that people find when dealing with broken believers center around the oldest ailment of mankind: pride. Pride caused the first man to seek to be like God. That sin has followed us across the ages. Pride causes people to judge without mercy, to set arbitrary boundaries so that they can remain exclusive, and to generally add to the laws of God anything that they're not tempted by themselves. It causes people to gossip, to divide into subgroups. It feeds racism, sexism, general meism. It places us over others and conveniently exempts us from our own standards, which is hypocrisy. This is the type of disappointment that we're all subject to. We are all guilty of it, all offended by it. And the only way around it really is to just do the opposite, to humble ourselves. Christ asks us to become his children, humble, forgiving, dependent on him, unconcerned about our own kingdom, and happy to live in his. This is a goal, and it's truly countercultural. It's difficult sometimes to distinguish between our passion for holiness and then the decidedly unholy personal self-aggrandizement in God's name. But that's where we have to show grace ourselves. Be patient. Christ is. Let him deal with the other children. The writer of most of the New Testament, the Apostle Paul, was no stranger to disappointing himself and others around him. He had a fight with one of his missionary companions, his mentor, and this fight was over Mark, another young helper that he disliked. This caused them to split very publicly. We still read about it today. Later, Paul mellowed and requested the young helper, showing reconciliation. Paul claimed that the things he wanted to do, he often didn't do. And things he didn't want to do, he often did. He carried his old nature around like a smelly carcass, he said, that he couldn't completely shake off. "O wretched man that I am, who will relieve me from this body of death?" Paul answers that question as to why Christians disappoint by comparing this life to a race. We run, we stumble, we fall, we get up, and we finish the race we're all called to. The thing about following Christ is, well, our failures seem to be the point of it all. We follow Christ so we can, over time, develop a new way of looking at the world and at looking at each other. Paul said we look in a dirty mirror every day and clean a little as we follow Christ, until one day that reflection that we see looks a lot like the reflection of Christ. Christianity is a journey with Christ's help as our traveling companion. When Christians disappoint, remember, you are meeting them along the way, not at the destination. This is the purpose of grace. It's really the attraction of the gospel. Most of all, the major characters in Scripture are anti-heroes who fail at life, who are redeemed, who are forgiven, who often fall again and then have to live with the consequences of their actions. But they do find new life in the arms of God and his grace. If you're a golfer, in golfing terms, we're all duffers, shanking shots into the trees and into the rough. We all need a do-over. But there's no free lunch in the world. And then Christ comes along. He offers us a cosmic mulligan, helps us play on, and we gladly accept. We are not automatically better players, but we are now walking with the Master, shot for shot. He guides us down the fairway. Well, the next question we have to answer is, what do we do when we encounter a believer that is behaving badly? One of our own. Well, in Romans we read that everything works good for those who are called of God according to his purposes. Basically put, God will not waste your pain. He gives us a plan to deal with the pain, to restore relationships, if possible, to release our bitterness. If we follow Christ, the disappointments just become opportunities to grow. Forgiveness is the cornerstone of our faith. It's a sword that cuts both ways, though. The letter of the Colossians states that we are to forgive, just as we have been forgiven. If we are people of forgiveness, then we're people like Christ. Sometimes, sadly, it's other believers who give us that much needed practice. Dealing with people often requires a dose of humility. When we're hurt, we naturally react with pride. We bite back. Christ's direction to forgive, as long as it takes, 70 times 7, requires patience. It requires us to empathize, as we're often in need of forgiveness ourselves. Long-suffering and patience are fruits of the Spirit that build relationships, and it increases personal happiness. If we practice the forgiveness spoken of in the Lord's Prayer, we will not be disappointed for long. One of the greatest gifts of grace is the fact that we get to practice it too. True Christ followers are not burdened with lifelong grudges. As we walk with God daily, we're forced to set that burden down. In light of Christ's sacrifice, carrying our anger becomes kind of embarrassing in his presence. He gently whispers, "Let it go." I did. This may sound a little bit trite, especially when the offenses are truly grave. But the graver the offense, the bigger the burden. And the bigger the burden, the more we need it. The more we need his help, the more we need his grace. It's precisely in those situations that the grace of God is at work in our lives, and it shows through to heal the wounds and bring peace. Humanity, is the reason that Christians disappoint. The grace of God is the answer to dealing with that disappointment. Now, disappointment is born out of expectation that's not fulfilled. We hold Christ's followers to a very high standard for a reason. Over time, they've been champions of morality in both the word and in deed. John says that they will know that they are Christians by their love. And Christians have, on the whole, blessed the world with a culture of forgiveness. Compassion and charity, help for the helpless, institutional medicine, civil activism, education for all, human rights advancements, a myriad of other cultural advancements are all part of the package with Christianity. Believers have, for reasons both good and bad, pressed the world to be better, more moral, more like them. This is not always met with applause. It does put Christians under the microscope. We are always under extra scrutiny. The culture expects every individual Christian that they encounter that's a fish on their bumper to live up to that hype. This is great as a platform to live out the gospel publicly, but the reality is Christians are still people. They will stumble from time to time. If you're a Christian, the responsibility to represent is great. For whom much is given, much is required. Christ said it would be better to be drowned with a large rock than to cause an innocent person to stumble, a child in their faith. In the sheep and goats parable, Christ claims that we will be judged by how we relate to each other. In our communities, especially towards the helpless, is it fair to hold Christ followers to the standard? Yes. Will they always measure up? Nope. Will they improve as they mature in their walk with God? Absolutely. That's the fruit of the Spirit. And if Christians walk with God and each other in prayer, it will be a part of the arc of their lives. God bless.